The message came through while I was assisting shoppers in my store. I'm departing and heading to Miami with my girlfriend who's 20 years old. I've already withdrawn everything from our shared banking account. Ha ha ha. My fingers remained steady as I viewed it. My tone stayed calm as I assisted Mrs. Peterson in selecting a wrap. The sole indication that my spouse of 12 years had just demolished our union through text messaging was a minor tightness surrounding my eyes. I delayed until Mrs. Peterson departed, her item packaged in our distinctive silver wrapping, before composing my reply. Best wishes. I'm Claire, and at 38 I just got the most heartless farewell imaginable. However, while Mark was likely celebrating his dramatic departure, envisioning me weeping over his unfaithfulness, I was peacefully securing my store for the evening. The indicators had existed for many months, the extended evenings at the office that never corresponded with his earnings. The abrupt password modifications on his mobile device, the manner he'd begun attending the fitness center, devotedly purchasing fresh clothing, attempting to regain his youthfulness. 3 months prior, I'd discovered a slip for dining for two at a costly establishment on an evening he'd stated to be working overtime. That identical night, I'd established a distinct banking account at a separate financial institution. 7 days afterward, when he suggested wanting to merge our accounts to make things easier, I'd consented happily while transferring my individual savings to the fresh accounts, the shared account he just drained. It held precisely sufficient to prevent him from becoming doubtful, approximately 2 months' worth of standard deposits. The remainder was securely positioned elsewhere, alongside comprehensive records of every questionable transaction he'd completed over the previous year. My mobile device vibrated once more. Don't trouble yourself pleading. Melissa and I depart tomorrow. I'll arrange for my belongings afterward. Melissa, the fresh receptionist at his workplace. I'd encountered her at the organization Christmas gathering, observed her chuckle excessively. At Mark's humor, recognized how she contacted his limb when she believed nobody was observing. She was youthful sufficient to be his offspring, inexperienced sufficient to believe she was unique. I didn't reply to his message. Rather, I contacted my attorney, the one I'd consulted 2 months earlier when I'd discovered the lodging charges on our charge card statement. It's the moment, I stated plainly. He just executed his action. The documents are prepared, she answered. I'll submit them initially thing tomorrow. Do you desire me to have him delivered in Miami? No hurry. Allow him to believe he's victorious initially. Another message from Mark. I understand this must be difficult for you. You're not becoming any more youthful after everything. At minimum, you possess your small establishment to maintain you occupied. My small establishment. The prosperous store I'd constructed from nothing. The one that produced greater earnings than his intermediate management role. The one whose earnings I'd meticulously kept distinct from our shared finances. I grinned, considering the verified correspondence that would welcome him in Miami. Allow him to appreciate his instant of victory. I devoted that night in our residence, my residence since I'd received it from my grandmother, and maintained it in my designation despite Mark's repeated recommendations to include him to the ownership. Another fortunate intuition that had succeeded. While arranging the documentation my attorney would require, I located our wedding collection. Mark appeared so altered then, before his midlife predicament had transformed him into a mockery of his previous self. These days, he displayed garments excessively constricting for his expanding midsection, attempted excessively vigorously to relate with the 20-somethings at his workplace, utilized terminology that sounded absurd originating from a man of 45. My mobile device kept vibrating with messages from him, each one more patronizing than the previous. I've been organizing this for many months. Melissa comprehends me in manners you never managed. You'll be acceptable. Perhaps you'll discover someone more your personal age. Previously informed my relatives. They concur we separated. It's nobody's responsibility, actually. I captured each communication, including them to my proof collection. Allow him to excavate his pit deeper. My attorney would appreciate his informal acknowledgement of premeditation, his joyful declaration about draining our account. The final message captured my focus. By the way, I utilized the shared card to reserve our transportation and lodging. Consider it my departing present, LOL. Flawless. I contacted the charge card organization. Mrs. Harrison communicating. I require to report deceitful charges and terminate a card instantly. Certainly, madam. Can you recognize the charges? 2 premium class tickets to Miami reserved today, lodging charges at the Royal Palm. And I'll require to eliminate my spouse as an approved user. Do you possess documentation of the deception? Message communications from my spouse acknowledging he utilized our shared card to reserve transportation with his companion after draining our banking account. I'll be pleased to transmit them. The representative's occupational tone couldn't completely conceal her contentment as she terminated the charges. Mark and Melissa would reach the airport tomorrow to discover their tickets invalidated. Their lodging reservation terminated. My mobile device vibrated once more. Don't concern yourself about the residence. I'll permit you to remain there until you locate something more compact. I genuinely chuckled audibly at that one. Did he actually believe he possessed any entitlement to my grandmother's residence? Had his self-importance expanded so substantial that he'd neglected whose designation was on the ownership? Another vibration. And I recognize the establishment means significantly to you. We can arrange a reasonable payment for your portion. My portion of my enterprise that I'd constructed myself, financed myself, developed myself, while he complained about my extended hours, and labeled it my pastime. I served a glass of beverage, the quality material I'd been preserving for a unique occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Mark would discover some harsh realities about ownership regulations and distinct assets. However, tonight, I'd appreciate the silence and organize my subsequent chapter. Morning delivered a sequence of progressively furious messages from Mark. What the heck did you execute to our charge card? The airline won't recognize our tickets. The lodging terminated our reservation. Respond to me. I muted my mobile device and proceeded to my store. Friday was perpetually our most active day, and I possessed a fresh delivery of designer purses to unpack. Existence continues, even when your spouse escapes with a receptionist youthful sufficient to be his offspring. Around soon, his parent contacted. Claire, precious Mark informed us everything about how dominating you've existed, how you forced him away. He states you're being spiteful now, generating difficulties with his transportation arrangements. I positioned her on speaker while I organized a window presentation. Did he reference draining our shared account and charging tickets for him and his companion on our charge card? Quietness. Then, well, he stated you abandoned him, no alternative, that you'd been and frigid and remote. Barbara, I possess his messages. Would you prefer me to recite them to you? The one where he celebrated about seizing our funds, or perhaps the one where he ridiculed my age? Another interruption. He did appear a portion harsh. I informed him that message communication was unsuitable. I value the contact, Barbara. I've perpetually admired you. However, I believe it's optimal if we conclude this discussion now. My attorney has recommended minimal interaction with Mark's relatives during the proceedings previously. Farewell, Barbara. By late afternoon, Mark's sibling Amanda was distributing family rumors through shared companions. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were trapped at a budget lodging near the airport. Their Miami dreams temporarily obstructed. He attempted utilizing his individual charge cards, however those had been exhausted for many months. Another warning signal I'd recognized, my attorney contacted with a modification. The crisis session is arranged for Monday. Given his acknowledgement of draining the shared account and the recorded charge card deception, we're in a powerful position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been delivered yet? Not yet. However, he'll obtain the documents at his fresh lodging location. Speaking of which, his companion's social platform is furnishing excellent proof. She's been publishing about their expedition all day, including some selection remarks about you. I grinned, considering my personal documentation. A year's worth of questionable charges, lodging receipts, message communications that demonstrated premeditation. Mark had been so concentrated on his dramatic escape that he'd never contemplated I might be observing, anticipating, organizing. My mobile device vibrated with another message. You believe you're so intelligent? However, I created duplicates of all the store financial records. Portion that enterprise is mine. I transmitted the message to my attorney, including it to the expanding file of Mark's errors. Allow him to discover the difficult manner about distinct assets and enterprise ownership. Sometimes the optimal retribution is plainly being organized. The crisis session on Monday was everything I could have desired. Mark appeared in his fresh, youthful wardrobe, designer trousers excessively constricting for his age, a jacket that announced midlife predicament. Melissa anticipated outside, her youthfulness painfully evident under the severe courthouse illumination. My attorney presented our proof systematically. Mark's joyful message about draining our accounts, his charge card deception, his recorded history of concealed expenses, each piece meticulously collected over many months of silent observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily employed attorney attempted. My patron acknowledges to some impulsive decisions. However, Mrs. Harrison's actions have been spiteful and deliberate. Deliberate? My attorney challenged. You intend cautious? My patron protected her distinct assets and sustained comprehensive records of her spouse's questionable conduct. That's not spiteful. That's intelligent enterprise. The magistrate examined my documentation, the distinct ownership to the residence, the stores, and organization documents in my designation exclusively, the meticulous separation of enterprise and individual finances that Mark had perpetually complained about. Mr. Harrison, the magistrate addressed Mark straightforwardly. You acknowledged via message communication to intentionally draining a shared account and utilizing common charge cards to finance a journey with your companion. Do you reject this? Mark adjusted uncomfortably. I was just attempting to create a pure separation by executing financial deception. The magistrate elevated an eyebrow. And presently you're asserting rights to ownership that documentation displays is obviously distinct from matrimonial assets. The enterprise expanded during our union. Mark's attorney attempted once more. My patron is qualified to. The enterprise was founded before the union. My attorney disrupted. And Mrs. Harrison sustained rigorous separation of enterprise and individual finances throughout. We possess documentation of every penny contributed and acquired. I observed Mark's expression as reality commenced penetrating. He anticipated this would be simple. Drain our accounts, escape with his companion, perhaps assert portion my enterprise in the separation. He'd never troubled to comprehend my persistence on maintaining things distinct, had ridiculed my meticulous record-keeping as compulsive. The tribunal discovers adequate proof of financial misconduct. The magistrate declared all common assets are suspended pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is commanded to restore any finances eliminated from shared accounts within 24 hours. However, that funds is vanished, Mark objected. We expended it on. Then I recommend you discover a method to substitute it. The magistrate interrupted him. And Mr. Harrison, the tribunal accepts a very unfavorable perspective of utilizing common charge cards to finance expeditions with paramours. Outside the courthouse, I perceived Melissa requesting Mark about their Miami arrangements. His reply was disappeared in the noise of my footwear, clicking confidently across the marble surface, proceeding back to the enterprise he'd never comprehended or valued. At the subsequent few weeks delivered a sequence of progressively frantic actions from Mark. He attempted asserting the store had been his concept. He recalled contributing funds in its initial days. He even recommended he'd been my enterprise associate all throughout. Assertions quickly disprove, demonstrated by my thorough records. He's becoming frantic, my attorney noticed. His companion's social platform displays their remaining at her studio dwelling now. Apparently, existing on a receptionist compensation isn't completely the glamorous escape he envisioned. Mark's relatives commenced contacting, their manner markedly altered from their initial allegations. We possessed no concept, his sibling Amanda acknowledged. He informed us you'd been frigid, dominating, that he required to escape. However, then we observed his messages. The manner he celebrated about seizing your funds. That's not the sibling I anticipated I recognized. His parent contacted once more, this occasion in weeping. The things he stated about your age, about substituting you with someone more youthful, I cultivated him superior than that. I anticipated, I executed anyway. I allowed their contacts to proceed to voicemail. Their assistance might have signified something weeks prior, however, now it appeared like rodents deserting a descending vessel. The store flourished, ironically enhanced by regional rumors about my circumstances. Females commenced arriving in specifically to display assistance, frequently departing with considerably more than they'd organized to acquire. My former attempted something comparable. One shopper confided while acquiring a designer purse. Anticipated he'd seize everything in the separation. Males like that never anticipate us to be more intelligent than them. My mobile device still vibrated occasionally with messages from Mark, his manner oscillating between fury and manipulation. You've demolished everything. I never intended to damage you. You'll regret being so spiteful. Can't we arrange something out? That enterprise would be nothing without my assistance. I transmitted each communication to my attorney without replying. Allow him to excavate his pit deeper. Through the network, I perceived Melissa was possessing subsequent considerations. Apparently, distributing her studio dwelling with a middle-aged male who couldn't manage his personal place was not the romantic expedition she'd envisioned. The age separation that had appeared exciting during secret lodging encounters appeared altered in the severe illumination of reality. She published about harmful relationships and discovering from errors yesterday. My attorney referenced during a modification contact and eliminated her relationship designation this morning. I almost experienced sympathy for Mark almost. However, then I recalled his haha after informing me he'd drained our account, the informal harshness of his remarks about my age, the manner he'd presumed I'd be powerless without him. Rather, of sympathy, I experienced something else. Pride. Pride in my perception, in my silent power, in my capability to defend myself while he minimized me. The final separation session depicted a very altered picture from Mark's envisioned victory. Vanished was his arrogant demeanor, substituted by barely hidden panic. Melissa was recognizably missing. She'd progressed on to a co-worker her personal age. According to workplace rumors, Mark had matured up in his previous clothing. The designer wardrobe apparently restored to assist, reimbursed the shared account he'd drained. His attorney appeared exhausted, likely from attempting to locate loopholes in my recorded separation of assets. Your Honor, Mark's attorney attempted one final occasion. Despite the distinct ownership documentation, my patron contributed to the expansion of his wife's enterprise through ethical assistance. And ethical assistance? My attorney disrupted, like these message communications minimizing Mrs. Harrison's enterprise. As a small establishment or these social platform publications labeling it her pastime. The magistrate had obviously observed adequate. The final resolution reflected my meticulous organizing. I maintained my residence, my enterprise, and my distinct assets. Mark obtained his individual possessions and his vehicle, which was valued less than he possessed on it. You've demolished me, he whispered as we departed the courthouse. I'll have to relocate back in with my parents. No, Mark, you demolished yourself. I just ensured you couldn't demolish me also. His parent was anticipating outside, prepared to transport him to her residence, his fresh residence at 45. The irony of his circumstances wasn't disappeared on anyone. The male who ridiculed my age was presently existing in his childhood chamber, while I continued operating my prosperous enterprise. You organized this all throughout, he alleged. You recognized this would occur? No. I just devoted focus, and unlike you, I comprehended the value of maintaining quality records. His parent positioned between us. That's adequate, Mark. You've humiliated yourself adequate previously. As they proceeded away, I perceived her commencing on him. Honestly, what were you contemplating? A 20-year-old draining banking accounts, transmitting those horrible messages? I observed them vanish into the parking area, experiencing nothing however relief. Mark had anticipated he was composing the conclusion to our narrative with that harsh message. Rather, he'd merely positioned my meticulously positioned arrangements in motion. My mobile device vibrated, not with messages from Mark this occasion, however with notifications of fresh commands from my store's website. Existence was progressing forward, just not in the direction he'd envisioned. Part 3, Segment 1, 600 words. 6 months after the separation was concluded, my store had expanded to a subsequent location. The irony wasn't disappeared on me. While Mark struggled to reconstruct his existence, the small establishment he dismissed was flourishing. I'd employed 3 fresh workers and initiated an online establishment that was obtaining momentum nationally. Information of Mark's circumstances trickled back through shared acquaintances. He'd attempted dating applications, however discovered females his age weren't interested in a middle-aged male existing with his parents. More youthful females, having perceived about his history through workplace rumors, directed clear. Melissa had apparently cautioned her companions about him, distributing screenshots of his frantic attempts to succeed her back after she'd departed. His occupation suffered also. The organization's HR division had initiated an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The advancement he'd been anticipating proceeded to someone else, someone who didn't possess a history of unsuitable relationships with reception personnel. Stated they were disciplining him for dating someone more youthful. HR just included that complaint to his file. I was astonished to observe his sibling in my establishment. However, her presence communicated volumes about how thoroughly Mark had separated his personal relatives. "I recognize we didn't assist you at initially," she acknowledged, operating her fingers over a silk wrap. He performed the sufferer so well, however, observing how he managed everything, how he functioned afterward, I am humiliated we ever believed him. My attorney maintained me modified on Mark's continued attempts to dispute the separation resolution. Each petition was rejected, his assertions of unjust distribution dismissed based on the proof of his personal actions. He genuinely attempted arguing that his message about draining the account was just a humor, she informed me, chuckling. The magistrate requested if "ha-ha" created theft, less unlawful. The store achievement delivered unexpected confirmation. Regional enterprise magazines desired to present my narrative not as a scorned wife, however, as a shrewd businesswoman who'd protected her interests. Youthful entrepreneurs requested for guidance about maintaining enterprise and individual finances distinct. "The optimal protection is organization," I informed one youthful female who reminded me of Melissa. "And perpetually trust your intuitions." Mark's parent contacted occasionally, usually after he'd executed something particularly self-destructive. He'd attempted online wagering, desiring for a rapid solution to his financial difficulties. He'd obtained involved with a pyramid arrangement that guaranteed rapid returns. Each attempt to recover his previous lifestyle just excavated him deeper into difficulty. "I don't recognize where we proceeded incorrect with him," she exhaled during one contact. "His father and I proposed to assist him obtain back on his feet if he'd just accept responsibility for his actions. However, he's still accusing everyone else. You, Melissa, his organization, the magistrate." I listened politely, however sustained my separation. Their relatives' drama wasn't my difficulty anymore. My existence had progressed forward, filled with arrangements for a third store location and a possible expansion into luxury accessories. The sole reminder of Mark's impact on my existence was a framed screenshot suspended in my workplace, his final message before I obstructed his designation. "Possess enjoyment with your small establishment. At minimum, it'll maintain you occupied in your previous age." Below it positioned my latest enterprise recognition, demonstration that sometimes the optimal retribution is plainly succeeding on your personal conditions. 1 year after the separation, I organized a dramatic opening for my third store location. The occasion attracted regional platform, and the narrative they desired to communicate wasn't about my unsuccessful union. It was about a prosperous businesswoman expanding her designation. Mark's unfaithfulness had become a mere footnote in my achievement narrative. During the occasion, Melissa unexpectedly proceeded in. She appeared more youthful than ever, or perhaps I just experienced that much more powerful. She adjusted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a protection. "I possess you an apology," she stated quietly. "I believed everything he informed me about how you were frigid, dominating, how you didn't assist his visions. Then I observed him attempt the identical manipulation tactics on me when things obtained difficult. I continued organizing a presentation of designer sunglasses. Those weren't his visions, Melissa. They were escapes. There's a distinction." "I recognize that now." She interrupted, then included. "He attempted to relocate in when you suspended the accounts. Anticipated my studio dwelling would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the dimension of my closet and recommending I accept out a loan for a larger place, I comprehended what you intended about the distinction between visions and escapes." I genuinely chuckled at that. "Allow me to estimate. He possessed substantial arrangements, however, no method to finance them." "Precisely. Everything was proceeding to arrange out once his contributions paid off. Once he obtained that advancement, once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value." She shook her head. "I'm dating someone my personal age now. We possess student loans and a small dwelling. However, at minimum, we're constructing something authentic." After she departed, my assistant manager whispered, "Was that the companion?" "No," I answered. "That was just another female who discovered the identical lesson I executed." Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a youthful couple examining our designer purses. "Allows communicate about your concept for expanding our accessories collection." The store had become more than just an enterprise. It was a representation of independence, of resilience, of the capability of organization. Youthful entrepreneurs frequently pursued my guidance, and I perpetually emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Mark's parent contacted one final occasion, not to discuss Mark, however to appreciate me. "You instructed our relatives an important lesson," she stated, "about enabling negative conduct, about creating excuses for harshness. Mark's still existing at residence, still accusing everyone else for his difficulties. However, we're not defending him anymore. That's your inheritance to our relatives, displaying the distinction between assisting someone and enabling them." I contemplated about that inheritance as I examined arrangements for a fourth location. Mark had intended to reduce me, to exchange me in for a more youthful model, and accept portion of everything I'd constructed. Rather, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even more powerful, more prosperous. My mobile device vibrated with a message from my attorney. Mark submitted another petition to revisit the resolution. Magistrate dismissed it instantly and commanded him to compensate tribunal costs. "Anticipated you'd appreciate that." I grinned, considering him in his childhood chamber, still attempting to recompose a conclusion that had been determined the instant he minimized me. Sometimes the optimal retribution isn't about obtaining even, it's about obtaining superior. 2 years after Mark's harsh message communication, I received an invitation to communicate at a females' enterprise conference. The subject wasn't separation or unfaithfulness. It was about constructing and protecting a prosperous enterprise. My narrative had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. During the question and answer session, a female requested about maintaining enterprise and individual finances distinct. My spouse states I'm being paranoid that union intends distributing everything. My former spouse stated the identical thing, I answered, right up until he attempted to assert portion my enterprise in our separation. Trust your intuitions. Protection isn't paranoia. The store chain had expanded to 5 locations, each more prosperous than the previous. The small establishment Mark had ridiculed now employed 30 individuals and had been presented in several national magazines. Through shared companions, I perceived Mark had finally relocated out of his parents' residence into a small dwelling above a storage. He'd had to accept a lower compensating occupation after his previous organization downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as youthful at heart, though his profile photograph was obviously outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular shopper at my original store location. She'd acquired her enterprise qualification and commenced her personal social platform consulting organization. "You inspired me," she informed me once, displaying how a female can construct something lasting rather than falling for empty guarantees. I maintained Mark's harsh message communication framed in my workplace, not as a reminder of pain, however, as demonstration of how distant I'd arrived. Below it suspended a signal that stated, "Achievement is the optimal retribution." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original store, I stood addressing my workers and loyal shoppers. The location had been transformed from a single small establishment into the flagship establishment of a flourishing enterprise empire. Mark's parent attended, though I hadn't transmitted her an invitation. She anticipated until the crowd diminished to approach me. "I observed Mark yesterday," she stated, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd acquired from my establishment. "He was communicating about his glory days, about the existence he could have possessed. He still doesn't comprehend that he didn't disappear everything in the separation. He discarded it away." I contemplated about that message communication, his informal harshness, his assumption that I would collapse without him, how he'd anticipated me to plead, to fracture, to demonstrate him correct about my desperation. Rather, I'd constructed something more powerful than before. Each fresh store location was a testament to what females could accomplish when they ceased dimming their illumination for insecure males. The youthful saleswoman I'd employed final month, coincidentally also designated Melissa, arrived over with a question about the fresh inventory mechanism I'd implemented. As I explained the procedure, I captured a glimpse of my reflection in the establishment window. I observed what Mark had unsuccessful to observe 5 years prior. Not a female becoming older, however, one becoming wiser, more powerful, more prosperous. His harsh message communication had intended to be in conclusion. Rather, it had been a beginning, not just for me, however, for every female who perceived my narrative and realized she deserved superior than someone else's midlife predicament.